On Sunday, April 14th, 1912, at 11:40 p.m., RMS Titanic, the largest liner in the world, has struck an iceberg on her maiden voyage from Southampton, England to New York City in the United States. Titanic has been mortally wounded from the collision, and Captain Edward J. Smith in command knows that his ship has very little time left to live. It's now a little past midnight ship's time, and Captain Smith gives the order to muster Titanic's officers and all the other available hands. He orders the lifeboats uncovered and swung out to be ready for use. First Officer William Murdoch is placed in charge of the boats to starboard, and Second Officer Charles Lightoller in charge of the boats on Titanic's port side. The two officers have an extremely difficult task. Other than a lifeboat drill conducted months earlier in broad daylight with a single boat as a test, they have never performed a full launch of all of the boats, which will be filled with hundreds of very worried passengers. And to make matters worse, it's a dark, moonless night, and the temperature is only a few degrees above freezing. In his own words, Second Officer Charles Lightoller describes his experience that night.
I was lying in my bunk when I felt the slight jar, not any sense of collision, but more a kind of shiver that ran through the ship. Anyway, it was enough to bring me out of my bunk in one jump. Out on deck, I ran over one side and then to the other, but there wasn't a trace of anything we'd struck. So back I went to my bunk and just waited. If I was wanted, naturally my cabin would be the first place where anyone sent for me would look. You see, apart from being nearly frozen, even an officer, when off watch, isn't exactly welcomed on the bridge, either in pajamas or anything else. Anyway, it wasn't long before Boxall, the fourth officer, poked his head round my door and said, "You know we've struck an iceberg." "I know you've struck something," I told him, not thinking it anything serious and feeling none too pleased. Then he said, "The water's up to F deck in the mailroom." There was no need for him to say anything more. I was into a pair of pants, sweater and bridge coat and out on deck almost as soon as he was. Now we've been running under a big head of steam, and the sudden stopping of the engines lifted every safety valve, and as a result, the steam roared off at all exhausts. The row was absolutely deafening. Added to that, the engineers started to blow the boilers down. Shout as loud as you like. No one could hear a word. At the same time that Boxall had called me, the order had been given, all hands on deck. And I met my watch tumbling up on the boat deck just as I got there. And the boat deck, just in case you don't know, is the top deck of all. I got hold of the bosun's mate and sort of showed him with my hands that I wanted him to start the men stripping off the boat covers. Now, in the merchant service, men are taught to think and, if necessary, act for themselves. They don't wait for pipes or bugles, and I can tell you, the 700-odd survivors of that night can thank God they don't. Every man jack just went about his job well as if it were an everyday occurrence. When the boats were stripped and cleared, they were swung out and lowered to the level of the boat deck. Just a little while before they were ready to swing out, I happened to meet the captain, and I asked him, by cupping my hands over his ear and yelling at the top of my voice, "Shall I get the women and children away, sir?" He just nodded, so I started to fill the first boat. Just about now, thank goodness, the roar of escaping steam stopped, and passengers, now they could hear themselves think, started asking me, "Why are you getting the boats out? And why are you putting women and children in them?" I told them it was merely a precaution, and that very likely they'd all be taken on board again at daylight, or at the worst, taken on board the ship everyone could clearly see only a few miles away. We could see all her lights quite plainly. But here again we were up against it. That ship was the Californian, and though her lights were plain to everyone on board the Titanic, she seemed to pay not the slightest heed either to our wireless calls or to the distress signals we were firing every minute. The reason why she didn't answer our wireless calls, which other ships heard halfway around the earth, was because she only carried one wireless operator. And when we struck the iceberg, he'd just gone off watch, so it was no fault of his. But why no notice was taken of our distress signals, shells that are fired hundreds of feet up into the air to explode with a cascade of stars, heaven only knows. What a chance her captain missed. He could have laid his ship right alongside the Titanic and taken practically every soul on board. However, he didn't, and the two ships gradually drifted further and further apart.
With Lightoller and Murdoch in charge of the lifeboats, Captain Smith makes his way to Titanic's wireless room. Once there, he informs Senior Marconi operator Jack Phillips of Titanic's situation and asks him to transmit CQD, the call for help. Phillips instantly takes to his telegraph key and signals Titanic's call letters, MGY. This is Titanic. CQD. We have struck a berg and need immediate assistance. Over the next hour and a half, Phillips's messages would become ever more desperate as the situation aboard Titanic became hopeless. Meanwhile, back on the boat deck, Murdoch and Lightoller are struggling to get passengers into the lifeboats. Lightoller explains.
But to go back again, up to the time of getting away the first few boats, no one believed that the ship was actually in any danger. I'm afraid my own confidence that she wouldn't or couldn't sink rather conveyed itself to others, for there were actually cases where women absolutely refused to be put in a boat. I remember one young couple, evidently not long married, walking up and down the boat deck. I asked the girl, she was only a girl, from the western states I should say, if I should put her in a boat. But no, she wouldn't be parted from her husband. Not on your life, she said. We've started together and we'll finish together. Brave girl, but she didn't know how near that finish was. Certainly I didn't. As time went on, I could see the bows of the ship getting steadily lower and lower in the water. Now, between lowering one boat and another, I frequently took a run forward and a quick look down a long stairway that led from the boat deck 3 or 4 decks down. Frankly, I'm never likely to forget the sight of that cold greenish water creeping step by step up that stairway. Some of the lights were shining down on the water, and others, already submerged, were giving it a sort of ghastly transparency. But for my purpose, I could tell by that staircase measurement exactly what was happening, how far down she'd gone, and how quickly she was going. Just when I first realized how desperately serious things were, I don't know. But I do know that before many boats were away, I got to piling more and more people into them. Partly because I now knew she was going, and partly because the boats were not remaining by the ship to be filled to their full capacity when waterborne. A far easier job than lowering them with their full complement from that tremendous height. Another thing, it was plain to me that if we were going to avoid the unutterable disgrace of going down with boats to hang in at the davits. We'd got not only to take chances, but we got to work like blazing. I've always admired the coolness and efficiency of merchant sailors in a tight corner, and I've seen a few. But that night, well, the Titanic's men set up a standard that'll never be beaten. Every single boat was filled and lowered from David Head to water, and got away without an accident of any kind. And that despite the pitch-black night and the conditions we were working under. The same tribute must be paid to the passengers for the courage they showed. For by the time little more than half the boats had gone, I knew, and I'm pretty certain they knew, that she was definitely going down.
At this point, most of the passengers on deck are quite aware of the peril. Despite this, things remain relatively calm and orderly. Much thanks can be given for this because of Titanic's band, led by Wallace Hartley. They were gathered now on the boat deck amongst the passengers, performing pieces such as the Wedding Dance Waltz, a light-hearted tune popular at the time. To the passengers and crew in lifeboats that had cleared the ship, the view was quite surreal. There was the Titanic, at nearly 900 feet long, severely down at the bow, her lights blazing, while the music of the band gently drifted over the calm water, setting a scene they would never forget. They knew now why the order of women and children first had been given.